College years. 50 miles south of Vienna, in the capital of the province of Styria, was the Polytechnic School in Graz. My Lutin had chosen the school because it was one of the most advanced of the region. The physicist and philosopher Ernst Mach had taught there a few years earlier, as had the psychophysiologist Gustav Theodor Fechner. Planning on becoming a professor, Tesla undertook courses in arithmetic and geometry from Professor Rogner, a lecturer known for his histrionics, theoretical and experimental physics with the punctilious German Professor Poschel, and integral calculus with Professor All. All was the most brilliant lecturer to whom I ever listened. He took a special interest in my progress and would frequently remain for an hour or two in the lecture room, giving me problems to solve, in which I delighted. Other courses taken included analytical chemistry, mineralogy, machinery construction, botany, wave theory, optics, French, and English. To save money, he roomed with Kosta Kulishik, whom he had met at the Student Society of Serbia. Kulishik later became a professor of philosophy in Belgrade. Tesla plunged into his work with great intensity, studying upward of 20 hours a day. He changed his major to engineering and extended his curriculum to study other languages. He could speak about 9 of them and the works of such writers as Descartes, Goethe, Spencer, and Shakespeare, many of which he knew entirely by heart. I had a veritable mania for finishing whatever I began, he recalled, reflecting on his next self-appointed assignment. The collected works of Voltaire comprised 100 large volumes in small print, which that monster had written while drinking 72 cups of black coffee per diem. This task cured him of the compulsion, but did not serve to quell the pattern of relentless self-denial and self-determination. Because he was praised by his teachers, the other students became jealous. But at first, Tesla remained unperturbed. Returning home the following summer, having passed his freshman year with all a +6, the young scholar expected to be praised by his parents. Instead, his father tried to persuade his son to stay in Gospel. Unbeknown to Tesla, his teachers had written minute warning that the boy was at risk of injuring his health by obsessively long and intense hours of study. A rift was created between father and son, perhaps in part because the military frontier authority had been abolished and the scholarship was no longer available. Reacting to the ridicule from other students, who resented Tesla for his monastic study habits and close association with the faculty, Tesla took up gambling. He began to stay late at the Botanical Garden, the students' favorite coffee house, playing cards, billiards, and chess, attracting a large crowd to watch his skillful performances. Tesla's father led an exemplary life and could not excuse the senseless waste of time and money. "I can stop whenever I please," he told his father. "But is it worthwhile to give up that which I would purchase with the joys of paradise?" During his sophomore year, a direct current gram dynamo was delivered from Paris to Professor Poschel's physics class. It was equipped with the customary commutator, a device that transferred the current from the generator to the motor. Electricity in its natural state is alternating. This means that its direction of flow changes rapidly. An analogous situation would be a river that flowed downstream, then upstream, then downstream, and so on many times per second. One can see the difficulty in harnessing such a river with, for instance, a water wheel, for the wheel would constantly change its direction as well. The commutator is comprised of a series of wire brushes that serve to transfer the electricity into only one direction of flow, that is, a direct current DC. It is a cumbersome device and sparks considerably. When Professor Poschel displayed this up-to-date equipment, Tesla intuitively deduced that the commutator was unnecessary and that alternating current AC could be harnessed unencumbered. He voiced this opinion, which appeared utterly fantastic at the time. Poschel devoted the rest of the lecture to a detailed explanation of how this goal was impossible. Driving the point home, Poschel embarrassed his student by disconnecting the superfluous commutator and noting with faint surprise that the generator no longer worked. Mr. Tesla may do many things, but this he cannot accomplish. His plan is simply a perpetual motion scheme. Tesla would spend the next 4 years obsessed with proving the professor wrong. Another invention Tesla worked on at the same time, but under the tutelage of Professor Uhl, was that of a mechanical flying machine. As a child, Tesla had heard stories from his grandfather about Napoleon's employment of hot air balloons, which were used to observe enemy troop movements and for dropping bombs. No doubt he had also studied the principles involved in school, and quite possibly saw such futuristic creations floating in the Austrian skies when he went off to college. By his third year, Tesla was running into difficulties at school. Having surpassed his classmates in his studies, he became bored and frustrated by his inability to find a solution to his AC problem. He began to gamble more heavily, sometimes 24 hours at a stretch. Although Tesla tended to return his winnings to heavy losers, reciprocation did not occur, and one semester he lost his entire allowance, including the money for tuition. His father was fuming, but his mother came to him with a roll of bills and said, "Go and enjoy yourself. The sooner you lose all we possess, the better it will be. I know that you will get over it." The audacious youth won back his initial losses and returned the balance to his family. "I conquered my passion then and there," he wrote, "and tore it from my heart so as not to leave a trace of desire. Ever since that time, I've been as indifferent to any form of gambling as to picking teeth." This statement appears to be an exaggeration, as Tesla gambled quite freely with his future and was known to play billiards when he came to the United States. An Edison employee recalled, "He played a beautiful game. Tesla was not a high scorer, but his cushion shots displayed skill equal to that of a professional exponent of this art." It has also been suggested that years later, in the early 1890s, Tesla bilked some of the wealthy socialites in New York by feigning minimal ability in the sport. Exam time came, and Tesla was unprepared. He asked for an extension to study, but was denied. He never graduated from the Austrian Polytechnic School and did not receive any grades for his last semester there. Most likely, he was discharged, in part for gambling and supposedly womanizing. According to his roommate, Tesla's cousins, who had been sending him money, therefore withdrew their aid. Fearing that his parents would find out, Tesla disappeared without word. Friends searched everywhere for him and decided that he had drowned in the river. Clandestinely packing his gear, Tesla traveled south, over the border into Slovenia, where he arrived in Maribor in late spring of 1878 to look for work. He played cards with the local men on the streets, as is still the custom today, and soon gained employment with an engineer earning 60 florins a month. But the job was short-lived. Tesla continued traveling, making his way through Zagreb to the small coastal village of Mingag. He would not return home, for he did not want to confront his parents. At the same time, however, Tesla also continued his quest for a solution to the problem of removing the commutator from the DC generator. His cousin, Dr. Nikola Tesla, recalled a story he had heard as a boy growing up in Yugoslavia in the 1920s. "My mother told us he would always like to be alone when Tesla visited us. In the morning, he would go off into the woods and meditate. He would measure one tree to another, making notes, experimenting stringing wires between them and transmitting current. Peasants passing by would be astonished at such an erratic person. They would approach and say, 'We're sorry, your cousin seems to be crazy.'" Having finally located his son, after word from Kulishik, who had seen Tesla in Maribor, Milutin traveled north to discuss his academic problems. Tesla refused to return to Graz, so Milutin offered a solution. His son would make a fresh start at another university. They returned to Gospey, re-accepted into the family. Tesla began once again to attend church to hear his father's sermons. There he met Anna. She was tall and beautiful with extraordinary understandable eyes. For the first and only time in his life, Tesla would say, "I fell in love." Delighting in her company, Nikola would take Anna for strolls by the river or back to Smiljan, where they would talk about the future. He wanted to become an electrical engineer. She wanted to raise a family. The following year, Milutin passed away, and a few months later, in 1880, Tesla left for Bohemia, now in the Czech Republic, to carry out my father's wish and continue my education. He promised to write to Anna, but their romance was doomed, and she would marry shortly thereafter. Tesla enrolled in the Charles Ferdinand branch of the University of Prague, one of the foremost institutions in Europe, for the summer term. According to Ernst Mach, who, a decade earlier, had transferred from Graz to be appointed Rector Magnificus, Prague was a city rich in talented people, with street signs often appearing in a half-dozen languages. Although the city was filled with majestic buildings, sanitary conditions were severely lacking. To avoid typhoid fever, one had to boil water or rotten mineral water from springs to the north. Just 2 years after Tesla's stay, Harvard psychologist William James would come to visit, to meet with Mark and Mark's arch-rival, Carl Stump, ordinary professor of philosophy. Stump was a student of the controversial ex-priest Franz Brentano, who also influenced another pupil, Sigmund Freud, and was also Tesla's philosophy teacher. Other courses Tesla undertook included analytical geometry with Heinrich Urich, experimental physics with Karol Domalep, both ordinary professors, and higher mathematics with Anton Pogda, who was an extraordinary professor from the German Technical University, also in Prague. With Stump, Tesla studied Scottish philosopher David Hume. Raised as a child prodigy of music, the acerbic and sharp-nosed Stu opposed a number of key psychophysicists, including the famed Wilhelm Wundt as well as Mark. But at the same time, he also helped shape the thinking of a number of key students, such as phenomenologist Edmund Husserl and child psychologist Wolfgang Kohler. A persuasive advocate of Hume's radical skepticism, Stump argued for the concept of the tabula rasa, basing his thinking on Aristotle and John Locke, both of whom repudiated the concept of innate ideas. Stump stated that the human mind was born a blank slate, a tabula rasa, impinging in it, after birth, wearial of primary qualitative. That is true knowledge about the world. Through the sense organs, Tesla learned, the brain mechanically recorded incoming data. The mind, according to Hume, was nothing more than a simple compilation of cause and effect sensations. What we call ideas were secondary impressions derived from these primary sensations. The will and even the soul were reduced by humato impressions and associations of impressions. At this time, Tesla also studied the theories of Descartes, who envisioned animals, including man, as simply automata incapable of actions other than those characteristic of Amakin. This line of thinking would dominate Tesla's worldview and would ironically serve as the template for a mechanistic paradigm that would lead the inventor to discover his most original creations, even though the whole idea of original discovery appears to be antithetical to this extrinsically motivated Aristotelian premise. According to Tesla and to this view, all of his discoveries were derived from the outside world. Although Tesla does not overtly refer to Stump's perceived adversary, in retrospect, it appears obvious that Stump's opposition did not stop Tesla from studying Mark's experiments in wave mechanics. Born in Moravia, now the Czech Republic, in 1838, Mark graduated from the University of Vienna in 1860. By 1864, he was a full professor at Graz, and by 1867, he was head of the Department of Experimental Physics at Prague, with 4 books and 62 articles to his credit. Influenced by the research in psychophysics of Fechner in Graz and Ludwig von Helmholtz in Berlin, Mark studied the workings of the human eye, along with his Prague colleague, famed physiologist and philosopher Jan Perkine. Both the eye and ear collected information from the outside world, analyzed it, and transferred it, via electrical impulses in the nerves, to the respective processing centers in the brain. This traditional line of research had been taken by many other well-known scientists, including Isaac Newton, Johann von Goethe, and Herbert Spencer, all favorites of Tesla's. In his laboratory, Mark had constructed a famous instrument known as a wave machine. This device could make progressive and standing longitudinal and transverse waves. Mark could display a number of mechanical effects with these acoustic waves and demonstrate the analogy between acoustic and electromagnetic events. By this means, the mechanical theory of the ether could also be demonstrated. By studying acoustical wave motion in association with mechanical, electrical, and optical phenomena, Mark discovered that when the speed of sound was achieved, the nature of an airflow over an object changed dramatically. This threshold value became known as Mach 1. Mark also wrote on the structure of the ether and hypothesized that it was inherently linked to a gravitational attraction between all masses in the universe, influenced overtly by Buddhist writings, which no doubt filtered down to esoteric discussions by the university students. Mark could hypothesize that no event in the universe was separate from any other. The inertia of a system is reduced to a functional relationship between the system and the rest of the universe. This viewpoint was extended to the relationship of mental events to exterior influences. Like Stump, he agreed that every mental event had to have a corresponding physical action. Since Mark's writing so closely paralleled Tesla's later research and philosophical outlook, Mark seems a curious omission from Tesla's published writings. By the time Tesla left the university at the end of the term, he had made great strides, both theoretical and practical, in solving the SC dilemma. It was in that city, Tesla said, that he made a decided advance, which consisted in detaching the commutator from the machine and studying the phenomena in this new aspect. With the death of his father, he needed to earn his own living. He began an apprenticeship in teaching, but did not enjoy it. Uncle Pajo suggested that he move to Hungary, where employment could be obtained through a military friend, Ferenc Puskás, who ran the new American telephone exchange with his brother Tivadar. In January 1881, Tesla moved to Budapest, but he found to his dismay that the operation had not yet been launched. The Puskás brothers were very busy men, running operations in St. Petersburg and overseeing, in Paris, Thomas Edison's incandescent lamp exhibit at the Paris Exposition and fixing the lighting system at the Opera House there. Out of funds and without a job, Tesla approached the engineering department at the Central Telegraph Office of the Hungarian government and talked his way into a position as a draftsman and designer. Working for a subsistence salary, he utilized what little surplus funds he had to purchase equipment to further his experiments. Antoni Szigeti, a former classmate and engineer from Hungary with the body of Apollo, and a big head with a lump on the side that gave him a startling appearance, became Tesla's friend and confidant. Many a night, when the budding inventor was not enmeshed in his research, the two fellows would meet at the local cafes, where they would discuss the events of the day or compete in such friendly games as determining who could drink the most milk. On one such occasion, Tesla claimed he was beaten after the 38th bottle. Due to his meager funds and general inability to budget himself, Tesla had but one suit, which had withered from use. It was the time of a religious festival, and Szigeti inquired what Tesla would be wearing. Stuck for an answer, the youthful inventor came upon the clever idea of turning his suit inside out, planning thereby to show up with a seemingly new set of clothes. All night was spent tailoring and ironing, but when one starts with the wrong premise, no amount of batching can right the problem. The outfit looked ridiculous, and Tesla stayed home instead. In a few months, the American telephone exchange opened there in Budapest, and Tesla and Szigeti immediately gained employment. The new enterprise allowed the young engineers to finally learn firsthand how the most modern inventions of the day operated. It was also the first time that Tesla was introduced to the work of Thomas Edison, the Napoleon of invention, whose improvements on Bell's telephone helped revolutionize the field of communications. Up the poles Tesla would climb to check the lines and repair equipment. On the ground he worked as a mechanic and mathematician. There he studied the principle of induction, whereby a mass with an electric or electromagnetic charge can provide a corresponding charge or force or magnetism in a second mass without contact. He also studied a number of Edison's inventions, such as his multiplex telegraph, which allowed for Morse-coded messages to be sent in two directions simultaneously, and his new induction-triggered carbon disc speaker, the flat, circular, easily removable device, which is still found in the mouthpiece of every telephone today. As was his nature, Tesla took apart the various instruments and conceived ways of improving them. By giving the carbon disc a conical shape, he fashioned an amplifier which repeated and boosted transmission signals. Tesla had invented a precursor of the loudspeaker. He never bothered to obtain a patent on it, except for friendly diversion with Szigeti. Tesla's every spare moment was spent reworking the problem of eliminating the commutator in DC machines and harnessing AC without cumbersome intermediaries. Although a solution seemed imminent, the answer would not be revealed. Hundreds of hours were spent building and rebuilding equipment and discussing his ideas with his friend. Thank you for watching. This is the of Nikola Tesla, the inventor.